American Revolution Part 2. Let's see if I can straighten that out a little bit here. We're up to about 1770, guys. We're really focusing on causes, events that are leading up to the American Revolution, what the issues are. Clearly, freedoms, what we would call liberty, was certainly a core issues here. But really a motive, a major motive, and certainly in the context of all these things is money, is people who are saying you're taking our property, you're taking away what we worked for without us having any say, and this is autocratic. This is not what we agree with. And in the tradition of John Locke, a English rebel, American colonists are beginning to stand up and say you can't do this to us. Now, up to 1770, the British colonists or British government has attempted to tax the colonists in order to get some kind of contribution for the running of the British Empire, and the Americans have protested this. But up to 1770, we don't have anything that's really going to ignite a general uproar, a general protest. This will come in March of 1770. By March of 1770, the American colonists begin to protest in a very organized manner. They have professional protesters, they have people who are out going down towns and cities protesting against British rule, British autocracy, they're attacking taxpayers. On the 5th of March, 1770, a group of protesters are outside the government building in Boston, 5th of March, 1770. And they are protesting. They got placards, they're yelling and screaming, and basically saying the British are terrible and they should go home. The government building in Boston also happens to be the military depot. It's a place where they keep weapons. So the British government sent troops to protect the government building. It's cold, it's snowing, and you've got young soldiers standing outside of the government building. Let's put things in a proper context for this major American event here. First of all, from the British perspective, we have a number of young soldiers, probably in their late teens, uneducated. If they'd had any pull or any finance or any money or any kind of leverage, they certainly would not be standing in the freezing cold in Boston, where most of them have really no idea where they're at anyway. Most of them have much education in geography and don't really understand much of what's going on. And they're standing out there, it's freezing cold. The protesters begin to throw snowballs at them. It's snowing. But the protesters are going further than that. They're breaking up shells, oyster shells, into the snowballs, and they're throwing it at these guys. These guys are getting hit up the side of the head with broken shelled snowballs. It hurts. So these young guys are standing there. They're getting screamed and yelled at. The snow is falling. There's a lot of chaos going on. Snowballs are flying through the air. And a weapon goes off. It's unclear exactly why or how. The American colonists or radicals will say that the British officer ordered the firing on civilians. The British government, which made an investigation into the event, concluded that it was an accident. And most of the evidence does seem to show that it was some kind of an accident. A soldier either hit by a snowball, dropped their gun, their rifle. The other soldiers, not clear what was going on, may have thought that the order had been given. They fired into the crowd. 5 American colonists will die, 3 immediately, 2 later. This will later be known as the Boston Massacre. Who gets to write history, guys? The people who get to write history are the winners. So the Americans, we know, will eventually win this war. So they call it the Boston Massacre. The British had won this war. It would have been called an unfortunate incident. Somewhat ironically and interesting, one of those first 3 to die for American freedom in what is known as the Boston Massacre was a man named Crispus Attucks. Crispus Attucks, who was a free black man, a sailor, who had come off from shore and got involved in the protests fighting for American freedom. It's one interesting when you think about our own race relations, the history of race relations in this country. In any case, the American radicals now have their event. Their event is the Boston Massacre. Americans died in the streets, and they will begin to draw pictures of huge exaggerations of American colonists in the streets being slaughtered by the hundreds and blood flowing everywhere. And wherever the radicals give speeches, they can always say, no matter what they talk about, polemics and liberty and virtual, whatever it has to do with representation, all they have to do is say Boston Massacre, and that gets people excited. That gets people riled up. The British government knows they have a problem. They don't have a problem. I'm not quite sure exactly how they're going to handle it. Ironically, and it is purely coincidence, on the 5th of March, 1770, the day of the Boston Massacre, the British Parliament had repealed all the Townshend duties except the duty on tea. And they kept the duty on tea simply as a matter of course, as a matter of saying we can do this. But in fact, for the next 3 years, 1770, 1773, they didn't sell any British tax tea in the North American colonies. The Prime Minister of Britain at this time was a man named Lord North. Lord North is one of the great demons of the American Revolution that the radicals will often depict and blame. But you have to understand, Lord North is hardly to blame for the American Revolution or the policies. In 1773, Lord North, as Prime Minister, was Prime Minister because most politicians didn't want to be Prime Minister. It was a thankless job. There was a lot of trouble, a lot of problems going on. Lord North wasn't a bad guy, but he certainly wasn't a great leader. The other leader that people often, or ruler that people often point to during this time period is the king, King George III. King George III did this and King George III did that. In truth, guys, King George III did not have much power. We know that he was, at many times during his life, mentally ill. If you're ever interested in seeing a great old movie called The Madness of King George, you can take a look at yourself. Crazy George could be. The point being, blaming Lord North or blaming King George III really makes no sense whatever. From 1770 to 1773, there's Lord North and, hold on,